After 15 years of apartment living, budget constraints, and putting everyone else first, I finally achieved what I had dreamed about since childhood: my own home with a backyard large enough for a swimming pool. It was not an extravagant house by any means, a modest three-bedroom ranch style in a quiet suburban neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. The property was perfect for my needs, with mature trees providing afternoon shade and enough space to build something special for my family. I still remember the day we closed on the house. The realtor handed me the keys with a smile and said, "Welcome to Oak Ridge. I think you will be very happy here." She mentioned something about an active homeowners association, but I did not pay much attention. Having never lived in an HOA community before, I assumed it meant well-maintained common areas and perhaps some seasonal decorations. Nothing that would impact my day-to-day life significantly. During the first month, I focused on interior renovations. By late spring, I finally had the time and savings to start on my backyard project. The pool I wanted was nothing extraordinary, just a simple in-ground design, approximately 12 by 24 feet, perfect for weekend gatherings and teaching my children to swim. I obtained all the necessary permits from the city building department and hired a reputable local contractor. The excavation began on a sunny Tuesday in May. The machinery roared to life, digging into my backyard soil with purpose. I stood on my back porch, coffee in hand, watching as my dream slowly took physical form. That was when I first noticed him watching, a tall, thin man with salt and pepper hair and glasses perched on the end of his nose. He stood at the edge of his immaculately landscaped yard, arms crossed, observing the construction with visible disapproval. Later that afternoon, he approached my fence line and introduced himself. "Richard Andrews, HOA president," he said without smiling, extending a stiff hand. "I notice you have begun a major landscaping project." His voice carried a tone of authority that seemed disproportionate to the casual neighborhood setting. I explained that all permits were in order, hoping to establish a good neighbor relationship from the start. "Yes, well, there are HOA considerations beyond city requirements," he replied, handing me a thick binder labeled Oak Ridge Estates Community Guidelines. "You will find pool regulations on page 47. I suggest you review them carefully." He departed without further conversation, leaving me slightly unsettled but still optimistic about my project. Over the next few weeks, construction progressed smoothly. I met other neighbors who seemed friendly and welcoming. The Johnsons to my right brought over homemade cookies. The retired couple across the street offered gardening advice for post-construction landscaping. Everyone appeared normal and neighborly, except for the occasional appearance of Mr. Andrews, clipboard in hand, making notes while observing my property from the sidewalk. The pool structure was completed by early June. All that remained was filling it with water and completing the chemical balance before my family could enjoy our long-awaited backyard oasis. I connected my garden hose to the outdoor spigot and began the filling process, knowing it would take approximately 24 hours of continuous flow to reach the appropriate level. That evening, I received my first official HOA communication, a white envelope with the Oak Ridge Estates logo embossed in gold. Inside was a formal letter stating that I had violated Section 12.3 of the Community Guidelines, excessive water usage without prior board approval. The letter demanded that I cease filling my pool immediately and submit a water usage application with a non-refundable review fee of $150. Confused and concerned, I called the City Utilities Department the following morning. The representative sounded equally perplexed. "Sir, your water usage is your business. You pay for what you use through your monthly bill. The HOA has no authority to regulate or charge you for utility consumption." She confirmed what I suspected. The HOA was overstepping its boundaries. Armed with this information, I approached Mr. Andrews that evening as he walked his perfectly groomed poodle past my house. I politely explained what the city had told me and asked for clarification on the alleged violation. His response was immediate and cold. The HOA can enforce any rule it deems necessary for community welfare. Water conservation is a priority in Oak Ridge Estates. The application and fee stand. As he walked away, I realized this would not be the simple, peaceful homeownership experience I had anticipated. Something felt fundamentally wrong about the situation, but I tried to remain optimistic. Perhaps this was just an overzealous interpretation of the rules that could be resolved reasonably. I could not have imagined then how quickly my quiet summer dream would transform into a neighborhood battle that would change everything. 3 days after my conversation with Mr. Andrews, a second envelope appeared in my mailbox. This one was marked Urgent Notice in bold red letters across the front. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it at my kitchen table. Inside was an official-looking document titled HOA Water Extraction Violation, with my name and address prominently displayed at the top. The contents made my stomach drop. Dear homeowner, it began in formal typeface. Following your unauthorized excessive water usage on June 12th through June 13th, the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association Board has unanimously voted to impose a water resource protection fine in the amount of $850. This fine must be paid within 10 business days to avoid additional penalties, including potential property lien action, as permitted under Community Bylaw 47.2. I read the letter 3 times in disbelief. $850 for filling my own pool with water that I would be paying for on my regular utility bill. It seemed absurd, possibly even illegal. The letter continued with vague references to community resource management and equitable distribution protocols, but provided no specific regulation or city ordinance to justify such an excessive fine. That evening, I walked around the neighborhood, hoping to speak with other homeowners about their experiences. Most seemed reluctant to discuss the HOA openly, quickly changing the subject or making excuses to end our conversations. However, Martha Henderson, an elderly woman who had lived in Oak Ridge for nearly 20 years, invited me onto her porch for lemonade. "They got you too, did they?" she asked once we were seated in the privacy of her covered porch. Andrews and his board have been pulling these stunts for years. Last summer, the Wilsons were fined $700 for excessive lawn irrigation after installing new sod. The Patels paid over $1,000 for what the HOA called unauthorized tree removal when they trimmed their own dead branches. Martha lowered her voice despite no one being nearby. Most people just pay to avoid conflict. Andrews knows exactly how far he can push before someone would spend the money to fight it legally. It is almost always cheaper to pay the fine than hire an attorney. Armed with this disturbing information, I decided to confront Mr. Andrews directly. I found him the next morning inspecting the community mailboxes with another board member. I approached with respect but determination, clutching the violation notice in my hand. "Mr. Andrews, I would like to discuss this water violation. I have confirmed with the city that the HOA has no jurisdiction over personal water usage. This fine appears to be unauthorized." He turned slowly, looking down at me through his glasses. His companion stepped away discreetly. "Mr. Johnson, is it? The HOA charter gives us broad discretion to protect community resources. Water usage impacts property values and community aesthetics. We set the rules here, not the city." His voice carried absolute confidence, as though stating undisputed facts. "But there is nothing in the guidelines specifying limits on water usage or mentioning pool filling procedures," I countered. Section 8, General Provisions, Paragraph 3. The Board reserves right to regulate activities deemed detrimental to community standards. Your excessive water usage falls under this provision. He smiled thinly. The meeting to discuss your violation is scheduled for Thursday evening. You are welcome to attend, though the decision has been made. True to his word, the HOA called a special board meeting that Thursday. The community room at the neighborhood clubhouse was filled with about 30 residents, most of whom avoided eye contact with me as I entered. At the front table sat 5 board members. Mr. Andrews centered among them like a judge presiding over court. My name was called first on the agenda. Regarding the water extraction violation at 1847 Oak Ridge Lane, Mr. Andrews announced to the room, the homeowner has chosen to dispute the fine. He then proceeded to describe my pool filling as if it were an environmental disaster, using terms like excessive consumption and resource depletion, while showing photos of my half-filled pool that had clearly been taken from my neighbor's yard without permission. When allowed to speak, I presented my research calmly. I have reviewed my water bill from the city. My usage is well within normal residential parameters. Additionally, I have confirmed with the Utilities Department that the HOA has no authority to regulate or fine residents for utility usage. My voice remained steady despite my pounding heart. The board members exchanged glances. An older woman with carefully styled hair spoke next. The decision stands. You have 7 days remaining to pay the fine. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties and possible lien action against your property. That night, I received an email containing an attachment labeled Final Notice and threatening immediate legal action if payment was not received within 10 days. The tone was nothing short of threatening. As I sat at my computer, staring at the screen in disbelief, something inside me shifted. This was not just about money anymore. It was about justice, fairness, and standing up to bullies who had terrorized an entire neighborhood for years. I made a decision that would change everything. I would not pay their fabricated fine. Instead, I would fight back, systematically, legally, and publicly. The fuse had been lit. The following morning, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. This situation required my full attention. I spread the HOA documents across my dining room table, the community guidelines, the welcome packet, property deed restrictions, and the recent violation notices. If I was going to challenge the HOA effectively, I needed to understand exactly what powers they actually possessed versus what they claimed. I started with the founding documents. Oak Ridge Estates was established in 1994, with the original HOA charter focusing primarily on architectural consistency and common area maintenance. I meticulously highlighted every mention of utilities, resources, or fines. After 6 hours of careful reading, I confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had absolutely no authority over utility usage on private property. Their jurisdiction extended only to visible exterior elements and common areas. The revelation energized me. Their entire penalty structure for water usage was built on fabricated authority, but why would they risk such obvious overreach? The answer came when I dug deeper into the financial reports that were buried in the back of the welcome packet. Each quarter showed substantial income from various community compliance fees and resource management penalties, vague terms that appeared nowhere in the official guidelines. Where was this money going? I needed more information. The next day, I visited City Hall and requested public records related to Oak Ridge Estates. The clerk seemed unsurprised by my inquiry. "You are the 3rd Oak Ridge resident to request these records this year," she commented while processing my request. This suggested I was not the first to question the HOA's practices. The records revealed something alarming. While the HOA was collecting substantial penalty fees, their official financial filings showed significantly less income than what should have been reported based on the penalty schedule. The discrepancy was too large to be accidental. Money was going somewhere unofficial. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Jacob Miller, who lived 4 houses down, stood on my porch looking nervously over his shoulder. "I heard you are looking into the water fines," he said quietly. "I have some documents you might want to see." Inside, Jacob revealed he had served on the HOA board briefly 3 years ago before resigning in protest. Andrews runs the board like his personal fiefdom. When I questioned the penalty system, I was immediately outvoted on every proposal thereafter. He handed me a folder containing meeting minutes, internal emails, and financial summaries that had never been shared with residents. "They have been doing this for years," Jacob explained. "Create a violation, impose an excessive fine, intimidate the homeowner into paying. Most people just write the check to avoid confrontation. The money supposedly goes into a community enhancement fund that only Andrews and the treasurer have access to." The documents confirmed my suspicions. There was a systematic pattern of inventing violations, specifically targeting new homeowners who were less likely to understand their rights or the HOA's actual authority. The board had collected over $43,000 in unauthorized penalties in the previous fiscal year alone. "Have people complained?" I asked. "Several have tried. The complaints mysteriously disappear from meeting records. One family hired an attorney last year, but suddenly withdrew their case. Rumor has it Andrews threatened to make their life unbearable if they continued." The next day, I knocked on the door of a brick house 2 streets over. William Harrington, a retired attorney who had practiced real estate law for 40 years, had been recommended by Jacob as someone who might help. Despite never having met me before, Mr. Harrington invited me in immediately when I mentioned the HOA. "I have watched this situation deteriorate for years," he said, examining the documents I had brought. "Andrews has created a culture of fear using quasi-legal language to intimidate residents." He adjusted his reading glasses and studied the violation notice. "This is not just unethical. Parts of this are potentially fraudulent. They are impersonating municipal authority by imposing fines on utilities they have no jurisdiction over." "Will you help me fight this?" I asked. Mr. Harrington nodded slowly. "I have been waiting for someone with the courage to stand up to them. We need to document everything methodically. Every communication, every interaction, every financial record we can obtain." Over the next week, we worked together assembling evidence. I purchased a small recording device to document verbal exchanges. I photographed every written communication. I set up meetings with other affected neighbors who shared similar experiences but had been too intimidated to act. Mr. Harrington advised me on the legal strategy, focusing on fraudulent representation and abuse of HOA authority. The case we were building was stronger than I could have imagined. This was not just about my $850 fine anymore. This was about systematic abuse of power that had affected dozens of families over years. The evidence pointed to potential misappropriation of funds, intimidation, and fraudulent misrepresentation of authority. As we prepared our legal strategy, news of my resistance began spreading quietly through the neighborhood. People started watching, waiting, wondering if someone might finally succeed in challenging the regime that had controlled their lives for so long. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I had become a symbol of hope for an entire community held hostage by fear. The annual Oak Ridge Estates summer barbecue arrived on the last Saturday in June. It was a tradition that predated Mr. Andrews' presidency, a day when neighbors gathered at the community park for food, games, and the mid-year HOA community meeting. Attendance was always high, as the event combined social opportunity with association business. This year, nearly every household was represented, with over 100 residents spread across the park grounds. The festivities began normally enough. Children played on the playground equipment while adults clustered in conversational groups, enjoying hamburgers and potluck side dishes. I noticed people watching me with curious expressions. Word had clearly spread about my defiance of the water fine. Some avoided me entirely, while others offered subtle nods of encouragement. At 3 o'clock, Mr. Andrews stepped onto the small gazebo platform that served as a stage. He tapped the microphone twice and called the meeting to order. After reviewing general community business, landscaping updates, upcoming road repairs, and seasonal decorating guidelines, he moved to what he called compliance issues. "As many of you know," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering, "the board takes resource management very seriously. It has come to our attention that certain new residents have disregarded our established community standards regarding water conservation." He looked directly at me, standing near the back of the crowd. In particular, the installation and filling of a swimming pool at 1847 Oak Ridge Lane was conducted without proper authorization, resulting in a significant resource penalty assessment. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Several people turned to look at me. Mr. Andrews continued, "The board would like to remind all residents that compliance with HOA directives is not optional. The property owner in question has been given multiple opportunities to resolve this matter, but has chosen a path of disruption instead." He was attempting to make an example of me, to publicly shame me into compliance while warning others against similar resistance. I felt dozens of eyes on me as my heart pounded in my chest. This was the moment we had prepared for. Mr. Harrington, standing beside me, gave a subtle nod. I raised my hand and spoke clearly. "I would like to address this issue if the board permits." Mr. Andrews seemed momentarily taken aback but quickly composed himself. "The floor recognizes the homeowner in question." His tone suggested he was granting me an undeserved courtesy. I walked calmly to the front, carrying a folder of documents. Mr. Harrington followed, standing supportively nearby. I faced the crowd, many of whom I had never met. "My name is Alexander Johnson. I moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 months ago, excited to join what I believed was a welcoming community." I opened my folder and removed several documents. When I received a fine for filling my swimming pool, I was confused, so I did some research. I held up the first document. This is City Ordinance 342.6 regarding utility usage on private property. It clearly states that homeowners associations have no legal authority to regulate or penalize utility consumption that is paid directly to the municipality by the homeowner. The crowd was completely silent now. I continued, "I also reviewed our HOA charter thoroughly. Nowhere does it grant the board authority to impose fines related to water usage." I displayed the relevant pages for all to see. Next, I produced my water bill. This is my current water bill, showing usage well within normal parameters. The city confirmed they have no issues with my consumption and that the HOA has no jurisdiction in this matter. I then revealed the folder of additional evidence. What I discovered was disturbing. Over the past 3 years, the HOA has collected over $120,000 in unauthorized resource penalties from residents. These penalties appear in no official financial statements submitted to the state. Mr. Andrews stepped forward, his face flushed. This is inappropriate for a community gathering. The board has procedures for disputes that should be followed privately. Mr. Harrington chose this moment to speak. William Harrington, attorney at law. I have reviewed all documentation related to this matter. The fines being imposed are without legal basis and potentially constitute fraud under state law. The crowd erupted in whispers. A woman near the front stood up. We paid $600 last year for exceeding approved water allocation for our garden. Are you saying that was illegal? Before I could answer, several others began sharing similar experiences. The dam had broken. Years of silent compliance gave way to vocal indignation. Mr. Andrews attempted to regain control. This meeting is adjourned immediately. The board will address these baseless accusations through proper channels. His voice had lost its authoritative edge, replaced by barely controlled anger. He stormed off the platform, followed by 2 other board members. The remaining board members looked bewildered, caught between following their president and addressing the growing chorus of questions from residents. The community meeting had transformed into an impromptu referendum on years of HOA overreach. As people gathered around me requesting copies of the ordinances and asking questions about their rights, I realized something profound had shifted in Oak Ridge Estates. The spell of intimidation had been broken in a single afternoon. Mr. Harrington quietly commented beside me, "This is just the beginning. Get ready for what comes next." On Monday morning, I discovered something shocking. During the night, someone had installed a metal lock box around my water meter. A laminated notice was attached. Water access restricted pending resolution of outstanding HOA violations. It was signed by Mr. Andrews as acting under emergency board authority. I immediately called the city water department. The representative who answered sounded alarmed. "Sir, that is tampering with municipal property. The HOA has absolutely no authority to restrict your water access. I am sending a technician immediately." While waiting for the city worker to arrive, I photographed the lock box from multiple angles and recorded a video documenting the situation. Mr. Andrews was escalating the conflict to dangerous new levels. This was no longer about fines. He was actively interfering with my access to a basic utility. The city technician arrived within the hour, clearly disturbed by what he found. "I have worked for the water department for 17 years and have never seen anything like this," he said, examining the lock box. "This is illegal tampering with city property. I need to report this to my supervisor and possibly the police." He attempted to remove the box, but discovered it had been secured with an industrial-grade lock that required special tools. "I will have to come back with proper equipment," he explained. "In the meantime, do you have an alternative water source? I can arrange for emergency delivery if needed." I assured him we had enough bottled water for drinking and cooking, but the larger issue remained. My pool was still only half filled, and now I had no access to water for basic household needs. The technician promised to return the next day with the necessary equipment, but that meant at least 24 hours without running water. That evening, Jacob Miller visited again. "Everyone is talking about what happened at the barbecue," he said. "Andrews is furious. The lock box is just his first move." He lowered his voice. "Listen, my brother-in-law works for the fire department. He might have a solution for your immediate problem." The next morning, Mark Thompson, Jacob's brother-in-law, arrived in his personal vehicle. He was an experienced firefighter with 20 years of service. "What Andrews did is dangerous and illegal," he said after examining the locked meter. Restricting water access creates a significant safety hazard. If there were a fire or medical emergency requiring water, you would be in serious trouble. He looked thoughtfully at the fire hydrant located near the corner of my property. There might be a temporary solution while the city sorts this out legally. As a firefighter, I have access to hydrant connections for emergency situations. What he proposed existed in a legal gray area, not exactly standard procedure, but justified given the safety implications of having no water access. That night, under cover of darkness, Mark returned with specialized equipment: a fire hose adapter, pressure regulator, and residential connection fitting. "This is a temporary emergency measure," he emphasized as he carefully connected the specialized fittings to the hydrant. "The water pressure from a hydrant is much stronger than residential lines, which is why we need this regulator. This should give you basic water access until the city removes that illegal lock box." 3 neighbors who had become allies in my fight against the HOA served as witnesses, documenting the entire process and the necessity behind it. One was recording video while another took photographs. The third, a notary public, prepared a statement describing the circumstances that made this unusual step necessary. With the connection complete, water flowed through the fire hose into my home's external water system. Mark directed the excess toward my half-empty pool. "Might as well make good use of it," he said with a slight smile. "The city would run the hydrant periodically for maintenance anyway." We worked quietly, but purposefully, under the ambient glow of street lights. The rushing sound of water filling my pool seemed triumphant in the night silence. It represented not just the completion of my original summer project, but resistance against unjustified authority. As predicted, Mr. Andrews discovered the situation early the next morning during his daily neighborhood patrol. His reaction was immediate and dramatic. He marched to my driveway, phone in hand, already connected to emergency services. "I need to report illegal tampering with city property," he nearly shouted into the phone. "A resident has connected an unauthorized line to a fire hydrant. This is a serious public safety violation." When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they found not just me, but Mark in his official fire department uniform, the notarized statement of circumstances, and documentary evidence of the illegal lock box on my water meter. What Mr. Andrews had intended as my moment of reckoning quickly transformed into his own. "Sir," the responding officer said after reviewing the situation, "it appears the actual tampering occurred when someone restricted access to this homeowner's water meter. That constitutes interference with critical infrastructure, which is potentially a criminal offense." Mr. Andrews sputtered indignantly. "I am the HOA president. I have authority to enforce compliance measures." "HOA authority does not extend to tampering with municipal water systems," the officer replied calmly. "I suggest you immediately provide the key to remove this unauthorized lock box." As neighbors gathered to witness the confrontation, I realized we had reached a turning point. The power dynamic had visibly shifted. Mr. Andrews was no longer the untouchable authority figure. He was being publicly questioned by law enforcement while I stood confidently beside a city firefighter. The expression on Mr. Andrews' face revealed he finally understood what was happening. His carefully constructed system of control was unraveling publicly, dramatically, and legally. His voice lowered to a harsh whisper as he faced me directly. "This is not over." But we both knew that it was. The confrontation with the police marked the beginning of a rapid cascade of consequences for Mr. Andrews and the HOA board. By afternoon, The city had dispatched not just water department technicians to remove the lock box, but also a municipal inspector to document the tampering incident. The inspector took numerous photographs and measurements, asking detailed questions about when the box appeared and who had installed it. "This will be included in the official investigation," he informed me, handing me a carbon copy of his report. "The city takes unauthorized interference with utility infrastructure very seriously. You should expect contact from our legal department within 48 hours." True to his word, the following morning I received a call from Patricia Lawson, Assistant City Attorney. "Mr. Johnson, we are opening a formal investigation into potential utility tampering and fraudulent representation of municipal authority in your community. Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement regarding your experiences?" 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room at City Hall, detailing everything: the initial fine, the escalating threats, the public confrontation, and ultimately the water meter tampering. Ms. Lawson recorded my statement and had me review and sign the transcript. "Based on preliminary findings, we are preparing to issue a cease and desist order to the Oak Ridge Estates HOA Board," she explained. "Their actions potentially violate several municipal codes and state statutes regarding fraudulent impersonation of utility authority." By Wednesday, the situation had escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. Mr. Andrews was formally served with legal documents at his workplace, a public spectacle that quickly became neighborhood knowledge. The cease and desist order specifically prohibited the HOA from 1. Imposing any fines or penalties related to utility usage. 2. Interfering with any municipal service or infrastructure. 3. Creating or distributing any communications suggesting municipal authority. 4. Taking any retaliatory action against residents who had filed complaints. The document was copied to every board member and filed with the county recorder, making it a matter of public record. The HOA was required to notify all residents of the order within 5 business days. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrington had been busy organizing affected homeowners. He called me that evening with exciting news. "We have 27 families who have documented improper resource fines over the past 3 years. The total exceeds $97,000. His voice conveyed controlled enthusiasm. "I have filed a class action lawsuit this afternoon nomming the HOA, the board members individually, and specifically citing Mr. Andrews for breach of fiduciary duty." The legal pressure continued to mount. On Thursday morning, a development occurred that no one had anticipated. Jennifer Wilkins, the HOA treasurer, requested a private meeting with Mr. Harrington and me. We met at his home office, where she arrived looking visibly stressed. "I cannot be part of this anymore," she began, placing a flash drive on the table. "I joined the board because I wanted to help the community. I had no idea what Richard was doing with the fine money." The flash drive contained 3 years of unofficial financial records, spreadsheets tracking compliance fees that never appeared in the official HOA financial statements. The documents revealed a pattern of collecting penalties that were immediately transferred to a separate account, accessible only to Mr. Andrews and Jennifer as signatories. He told me it was a special projects fund authorized by the board. I believed him until recently. Her hands trembled slightly. When I questioned him about the water meter lock boxes he was having installed, he told me to mind my own business. That is when I knew something was seriously wrong. Jennifer agreed to provide a sworn statement to both the city attorney and for our class action lawsuit. With her testimony and documents, the case against the HOA leadership became virtually unassailable. By Friday, The neighborhood was in upheaval. The board attempted to call an emergency meeting, but few residents attended. Those who did openly challenged every statement made by the remaining loyal board members. The once feared HOA had lost its grip on the community. That afternoon, I received an official letter from the city water department. It contained a formal apology for the inconvenience caused by the tampering incident, assurance that my water service was now protected from interference, and confirmation that the city was pursuing all available legal remedies against those responsible. The letter concluded with a personal note from the department director. Your willingness to document and challenge this overreach has revealed a pattern of behavior that may have affected many others. The city thanks you for bringing this serious matter to our attention. The news media caught wind of the story by the weekend. A reporter from the local newspaper contacted me for comments regarding what they were calling HOA Gone Wild, the water extortion scheme. While I declined to speak on the record during pending litigation, the resulting article detailed the situation based on public records and featured statements from the city attorney's office confirming the investigation. Mr. Andrews attempted to maintain control through increasingly desperate measures. He sent a community-wide email claiming the entire situation was a misunderstanding being exploited by disgruntled residents. He insisted the board had always acted within its authority and promised to vigorously defend the community standards. His email received an immediate response, not from residents, but from Mr. Harrington, who sent a community-wide legal notice advising the board to cease all communications that might constitute continued misrepresentation or interference with the legal process. The balance of power had completely shifted. What had begun as a simple dispute over filling a swimming pool had exposed years of financial impropriety, intimidation, and abuse of authority. The neighborhood that had lived under Mr. Andrews' shadow for so long was finally emerging into the light of justice and accountability. As the weeks progressed, many residents approached me privately to share stories of their own HOA experiences. Some had paid thousands in improper fees over the years. Others had abandoned home improvement projects rather than face HOA harassment. All expressed gratitude that someone had finally stood up to the regime they had feared for so long. The final blow came when the court issued a preliminary injunction, removing the current board members from authority pending resolution of the legal cases against them. A temporary neighborhood committee was appointed to handle essential community affairs until proper elections could be held. The storm of legal consequences was only beginning, but already the atmosphere in Oak Ridge Estates had transformed. People waved and greeted each other warmly. Lawn chairs appeared on front porches that had previously remained empty. Children played more freely in yards where unauthorized activities had once been scrutinized and penalized. By mid-July, the legal proceedings against the former HOA board had progressed rapidly. Faced with overwhelming evidence and Jennifer's insider testimony, Mr. Andrews and his closest allies on the board agreed to resign their positions permanently as part of a settlement negotiation. The court appointed a professional management company to temporarily oversee association affairs until proper elections could be held in September. The class action lawsuit continued advancing through the legal system. Mr. Harrington informed all participants that the initial settlement offer from the HOA insurance company was substantial, though negotiations were ongoing. They know the evidence is irrefutable, he explained during a group meeting of affected homeowners. Their primary concern now is limiting public relations damage and preventing criminal charges. As summer reached its peak, my pool, the unwitting catalyst for neighborhood revolution, was finally complete. The water sparkled clear blue under the July sun, surrounded by newly installed decking and modest landscaping. What had begun as a simple family project had transformed into something more symbolic, a visible reminder that standing up for what is right sometimes requires courage and perseverance. I decided to host a community gathering, not just a pool party, but a celebration of neighborhood solidarity. The invitations went to every household in Oak Ridge Estates, including those who had previously supported the old regime. Reconciliation seemed an important step forward. The response was overwhelming. Nearly 70 families confirmed their attendance. People volunteered to bring food, drinks, chairs, and shade canopies. The event quickly evolved beyond my original vision into a full community festival centered around my backyard. On the day of the party, my property transformed into a joyful gathering space. Children splashed happily in the pool that had caused so much controversy. Adults mingled on the lawn, many meeting their neighbors properly for the first time without fear of HOA surveillance. The atmosphere was one of relief and renewed connection. Martha Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had first told me about the HOA's history of abuses, sat in a chair of honor near the pool. "I never thought I would see this day," she confided as I brought her a plate of food. "For 15 years, I watched this neighborhood live in fear of that man. He turned neighbors against each other. He made people afraid to plant flowers or paint their shutters. Now look at us." She gestured toward the crowd of laughing, conversing residents. "This is what community should be." Jacob Miller, who had first provided me with internal documents, arrived with his family. "The temporary management company found financial records you should know about," he said quietly, while our children played in the pool. Andrews had been diverting fine money into a separate account for years. They estimate nearly $200,000 unaccounted for in total. Throughout the afternoon, residents shared stories of their experiences under the previous regime. Some were humorous in retrospect, like the elderly couple fined for having wind chimes that exceeded the authorized audible range. Others were deeply troubling, revealing a pattern of targeted harassment against anyone who questioned authority. The most poignant moment came when Jennifer Wilkins, the former treasurer who had become a whistleblower, arrived hesitantly at the edge of the gathering. Several people noticed her and fell silent, creating an awkward moment of tension. I walked over immediately and welcomed her publicly with a handshake that evolved into a spontaneous hug. "Thank you for your courage," I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "What you did helped everyone in this community." The gesture broke the ice, and others soon approached her with similar sentiments. Her relief was visible as she was gradually accepted into conversation groups. As evening approached and families began collecting their children for home, Mr. Harrington called for everyone's attention. Standing near the pool that had started everything, he made a brief but significant announcement. "I wanted everyone to know that the settlement negotiations have concluded successfully. The insurance company has agreed to full restitution for all improperly collected fines, plus damages." A cheer rose from the crowd. "Additionally, the court has approved our petition for a completely restructured HOA charter with strict limitations on board authority and mandatory financial transparency." The announcement triggered a spontaneous round of applause. Parents lifted children onto shoulders. Neighbors embraced. Years of accumulated tension released in a collective moment of vindication. As the party wound down and the sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and purple, I noticed movement across the street. A large moving truck was parked in front of Mr. Andrews' immaculate colonial home. Workers carried furniture and boxes while he supervised with tight-lipped efficiency. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. He quickly looked away, continuing to direct the movers with clipped instructions. No one approached him. No one offered to help. The man who had ruled the neighborhood with intimidation and false authority was leaving quietly, without ceremony or acknowledgement. There was something profoundly satisfying about the contrast, the warm community gathering on one side of the street, the solitary departure on the other. The following week brought the official election announcement for the new HOA board. Unlike previous years when positions were effectively appointed by Mr. Andrews, this election generated genuine interest. 12 residents nominated themselves for the 5 available positions, including several who had been vocal in challenging the previous leadership. I was surprised when multiple neighbors approached asking if I would run. "You started this whole change," Martha told me. "You should help guide where it goes next." After careful consideration, I submitted my name as a candidate, not for president but for a regular board position where I could contribute to rebuilding community trust. The election town hall was held in the community center, the same room where I had once been publicly shamed for filling my pool. The atmosphere could not have been more different. Candidates spoke passionately about transparency, fairness, and genuine community service. Residents asked thoughtful questions about priorities and governance philosophy. When results were announced the following day, the new board reflected the neighborhood's diversity for the first time, varying in age, background, and perspectives. I had been elected, along with Jacob Miller, Jennifer Wilkins, whose insider knowledge was deemed valuable for reform, a retired school principal, and a young landscape architect with innovative ideas for community spaces. Our first official act was symbolic but meaningful. We renamed the Fine and Compliance Committee to the Neighborhood Enhancement Committee, with a mandate to assist rather than penalize homeowners. The second was substantive. We hired an independent accountant to establish proper financial controls and transparency measures. By late August, the class action settlement checks began arriving in mailboxes throughout Oak Ridge Estates. For many families, the restitution represented not just financial recovery, but moral vindication. Some used the money for home improvements they had previously abandoned for fear of HOA interference. Others donated portions to establish a community assistance fund for residents facing hardships. On Labor Day weekend, exactly 3 months after my confrontation at the summer barbecue, we held the first Oak Ridge community celebration in the park. The event featured food trucks, local musicians, and activities for children. The centerpiece was the unveiling of a new community charter, beautifully framed and prominently displayed for all residents to read. Standing by the display with my family, watching neighbors interact with genuine warmth and without fear, I reflected on the extraordinary journey a simple backyard pool had initiated. What began as a modest summer dream had catalyzed a community transformation, exposing corruption and ultimately creating something better for everyone. That evening, as we closed up the celebration, Martha Henderson approached me again. "I have lived here longer than almost anyone," she said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Today is the first day I have truly felt like I belong to a community rather than a corporation." She squeezed my hand gently. "All because you refused to pay an unjust fine for water." As we walked home together, my daughter skipping ahead with neighborhood friends she had made during our battle for justice, I glanced back at the park. The old HOA bulletin board that once displayed violation notices and threatening reminders now held community event announcements, offers of neighborly help, and children's artwork. The water in my pool would eventually grow cold with autumn's approach. It would need to be covered for winter. But what it represented would remain: The power of one person refusing to accept injustice, the strength found in community solidarity, and the fundamental truth that systems of control function only as long as people fear challenging them. Mr. Andrews had moved to another suburb across town. Rumors suggested he had already joined that community's HOA board. Perhaps someday, another homeowner would stand up to him there, inspired by what we had accomplished in Oak Ridge Estates. For now, our neighborhood had reclaimed something precious, not just freedom from petty tyranny, but the genuine connection that makes a group of houses truly become a community. As I opened my front door, I paused to look at my modest home with its now infamous pool visible in the backyard. What had begun with a simple dream of summer swimming had ended with a neighborhood revolution, all because someone finally said no to a fabricated fine, and a fire hydrant became an unlikely symbol of resistance. Sometimes, the most significant changes begin with the smallest acts of justified defiance.